Life as Ceremony shares personal stories, interviews with inspirational souls, and practical wisdom to help you reconnect with yourself and spirituality. Welcome back to another episode of Life as Ceremony. Today we have Jazmin Feschuk joining us. She's a First Nations woman from Sechelt Nation, a counselor, and my good friend and colleague. Thanks for joining us, Jazmin.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Are you ready for rapid fire?
I'm excited for this. Yes.
Okay, then let's get right into it. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Dogs or cats?
I think we both know this one. Dogs.
You know what? I think the only person who has answered cats so far is Steven. Steven was an instructor Jazmin and I both had in school, but I think it was Steven.
That's sweet.
His cat's name is Tiberius, by the way. What a great name. I know.
Wow.
Um, okay. Choose between the following.
Okay.
Always having to sing instead of talk, or always having to dance instead of walk.
Oh, dance for sure.
That's what I would choose too. Imagine if you had to sing this entire podcast. But you
I
just,
thought of it being as like good exercise.
yeah, good point. Good point. Uh, Moccasins or beaded jewelry?
Oh, beaded jewelry.
Thanks. Sweet or savory foods?
Savory.
Savory. Do you have a favorite?
No, I don't have a favorite, but a fun fact is that I just don't like chocolate.
You don't like chocolate.
I don't really like sweets.
You don't like sweets. Okay, so it's that you don't even like sweets.
Mm-hmm. Not a
Okay.
fan. I like some of them I do, but I'm not a fan.
Okay, well, we should go out for dessert so that I can have all of it. Um, that's too funny. For savory foods, I love popcorn. Like I love salty,
Yes.
buttery popcorn. It's my favorite.
Movie popcorn.
Eagles or wolves?
Oh. I want to say eagle just because that's the crescent of where I'm from.
Mhm.
Um, but it's funny because we are the eagles and my partner's wolf. So
Oh,
nice
so you
sense.
got both. You
Yeah.
can choose both too. It's just this or that.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite quote or any words to live by that you want to share with us?
Um, I'll have to come back to that one. Can you ask me that near the end?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I forget, remind me, but I will do my best. Okay, yeah. So today I really wanted to chat with you about ancestry, reconnecting with ancestry. I know that's been, part of like each one of our journeys in different ways. And also just, what you're up to now, and maybe we can chat about Indigenous ways of healing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really that question I guess can go in so many different ways. Ancestry has been an ever-growing experience, like a learning experience. I feel that I'll never know everything about my ancestry or, maybe even our culture, but I think it's very open to where we're always learning, where we come from, who our family are, who we are as well, I guess I'll speak for myself as a Coast Salish woman. But my ancestry, I come from, as you mentioned, Sechelt Nation. I was born and raised there. Up until my mid-20s, I thought I was just from Sechelt Nation, but I'm actually from Squamish Nation as well. I have Squamish ancestry, and yeah, I grew up in a small town. So, and my mom actually is she's English and Scottish. Um, I'm still learning about where my mom comes from and what she is, but My dad is the one that comes from Sechelt Nation and Squamish Nation.
Okay.
Um, yeah, is there more that we
Ooh,
want to talk
I
about?
have lots of questions for
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Well, I'm curious what led you to first reconnect with your First Nations ancestry, or what was your knowledge or understanding of it growing up? Yeah, anything.
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, So it might get a little bit deep for a moment here, but growing up, I didn't get to grow up with my culture very much. I was around it, but I didn't have much of an understanding with our culture. So it was kind of always just there in a way. But my dad, he didn't grow up with it as well because he was a part of the 60s scoop, as well as his mother, who would be my grandma, was in residential school, and then so on. Her mom and dad were in residential school, so there was culture back home, but I was never. It wasn't in my home. It wasn't in my home. It wasn't taught in my home. It wasn't talked about in my home. Um, so I kind of just grew up existing. I felt existing with my friends on the reserve and off reserve, um, and then my because my mom is she's white passing. She is white, but she's also white passing. I grew up not knowing why I wanted this, but I grew up wanting blonde hair, whiter skin, green eyes like my mom and my sister, and to be a little bit I guess I was tiny, but like a smaller build, I wanted a different look. I didn't like the way I looked, but I didn't know why. Um, and I think that really ties in with a lot of society's worldviews of First Nations people, and it just kind of it was just put on me somehow. Um, it wasn't up until I was probably in my mid or no, early 20s where I actually really started to learn about my culture, learn about my identity, learn about my ancestry. And in that beginning though, I was also I went through addiction. So I went through addiction right from when I was I want to say 13, 14 up until I was 23. And when I went to treatment, they were all about spirituality. They were all about praying, and I didn't know what that was about. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to start praying. I don't know who to pray to. I don't know how to pray. So I started reading some prayers, and something's like a small action was so big and dominant in my life at that point that it bridged the gap to my culture because I was told that prayer is one of our main sources of strength as First Nations people. And so once I learned how to pray, I started to believe in things. I started to believe in my prayer, the creator. And so when that bridge was gapped going into learning about our culture, that I think that's where the beginning of it was. Really learning of how Coast Salish people practice our ceremonies, the way of life that we used to do hundreds of years ago. And, I didn't know about residential schools until I was in my late teens as well. I didn't understand the impacts that it had on myself because growing up, because I had a white mother and a First Nations father, you know, because my dad didn't go to residential school, I thought, oh, I'm not affected. It doesn't affect me. I have no part. I don't practice my culture. I'm not a part of that. I'm okay. But lo and behold, I was a prime product and so was my dad,
Mhm.
of that. So, um, again, it's just being uneducated, unaware, and for when the government wants to hide something so much, it even hid it from our own people. It doesn't have to, just because we're First Nations doesn't mean we know everything, right, about ourselves. So I guess I can say like in the beginning of my 20s is when I really started to dive deep into our culture and be proud a proud Coast Salish woman. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And when
Mhm.
you talk about being in addiction and all of a sudden being introduced to spirituality, introduced to prayer, and having it be the bridge that brought you back to culture in that way, from there, where did you go? Was there any one in particular in your community or any relatives? Yeah, once that started to speak to you in that way,
Mhm.
um, did you did anything seek you out? Did you seek out anything? And how did that bridge continue to, I guess, get stronger?
Yeah. It's actually kind of cute because so my partner, my boyfriend, Damien, he's a really big part of me being introduced or maybe reintroduced, into our culture, into our way of life. When I was in treatment, um, I think I think 2 or 3 months into treatment, into my sobriety, I saw Damien and I cross paths. Um, and he reached out to me after we crossed paths, and he said, do you wanna hang out?" And so I didn't want to tell him that I was in treatment at the time. So I had to do a little white lie. I got him to pick me up at a gas station, like walking distance from where I was. And I got in the car and he just said, "How are you?" And then I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna tell him the truth." And so I told him I was in treatment, trying to be sober, trying to, restart my life. And I was really scared telling him that. And he said, "You know what? That's amazing. Like, I'm so proud of you." And, he had a little bit more of understanding of, what our people go through, and one of them being addiction. And so since then, I have a lot to be grateful for him, but also his family, accepting me in and just showing me, you know, how we live, how showing me ceremony, um, and really placing that or paving that path for me, you
Mhm,
know, with open arms. And I I really have a lot of gratitude for them because that's where it started. I had to move away from home to better myself.
mhm,
So I actually had to distance myself from my family, and friends and the people that I grew up with for those 23 years of my life, to pave that path of recovery and spirituality and our culture. So I have Damien to really be thankful for that because, we met that one time at a gas station, and then he dropped me off at the treatment center that night. So he was okay to see where it was. But since then, we've been together ever since, and we're going on to 7 years. So,
wow. Congratulations, by the way, 7 years. Also seven for the sacred number. So yeah,
oh,
yeah. Um, Damien, I don't know if I know what nation or community he's from.
so he's from Squamish Nation and Tsleil-Waututh Nation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I also didn't know the gas station story. So thanks
Oh,
for
so I wonder if you knew that or not.
thank you for sharing that with me today. Yeah. I'm curious if there's been what's been most challenging with your reconnection journey, and also what's been most helpful or healing.
I think the most challenging part is really just trying to find a place, really, a place in our way of life, because there is, a lot of broken people in our community. There's a lot of broken communities, because of what we've been through with residential school, with addiction, with poverty, with, lack of education, with racism. It's been challenging, but it's also the enlightenment part of it overcomes the challenges.
Mhm.
But I think the most challenging part is trying to find out who my family is. You know,
Mhm.
and not only, I know who my immediate family is, but, my grandparents.
Mhm.
Never got to meet my grandparents. My dad didn't get to meet his parents. Um, and, all of his siblings got to grow up with the grandparents, because he was the only one that was adopted out in the 60s scoop. So I think the most challenging part was trying to find where I fit in within my own people.
Mhm.
And that's the real part about it. We can feel there's that connection piece that we're trying to fill, but it's it's trying to find a place in where, it could be broken,
Mhm.
like in broken places, right? So I think that's the most challenging part, but I think the most what was the second question?
Yeah, just the contrast to challenge what's been most helpful or most healing.
hmm I think going to ceremony has been really healing. Really diving into um yeah, ceremony, even prayer. Like I say, prayer is a big, big, big connection that I have. It's something that I really believe in. And even connecting to the water. The water is a really big piece, and canoe racing. And um, yeah, I think connection to the land, the water, people, family. Yeah.
When you talk about this, fitting in or trying to find that. And then in regards to what's been most helpful or healing, like reconnecting with the water, with the land, I often think we are the land,
Mhm.
right? And I'm curious how you feel about that idea that we are the land. Because in terms of fitting in or reconnecting with these aspects of self or nature and seeing yourself mirrored in them, do you feel similarly or do you feel different?
I think a bit of both. A bit of both. It's just because, I'm a part of a community, I come from a community, we have similarities to other communities, but we also have our differences.
Mhm.
And so, I've really learned a lot about my partner's community and really felt connection towards that. Then also there's that missing piece. I can't forget where I come from,
Mhm.
where how we do things back home. And that's another really big piece because I had to separate myself in the beginning to heal parts of myself. I had to separate myself from my community, from my family, from my friends in order to heal. But now I'm being pulled to learn my family tree. I'm being pulled to learn things about the land, the oral history of, the people where I come from. Even though I have ancestry in Squamish, a lot of my ancestry is also in Sechelt. So, finding the connections between the two communities or the two territories. And there's a lot of similarities, but I think the difference is you want to really feel at home wherever you are. I think that's a really big piece that um, we all search for,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to like acknowledge or highlight, different nations and different communities um, have different ways of being and living, lots in common, but also different languages, different ceremonies, different practices. I know for myself on my reconnection journey that, especially being out west, I'm Nakota and I come from, or my relatives come from, Carry the Kettle First Nation in southern Saskatchewan and Montana, right? And that's so different from, being on the West Coast. And we have so much in common, but in terms of even connecting with certain communities, there's still, yeah, not necessarily at home, or it's still, yeah. I just wanted to share that with listeners because I think that it's such a great reminder of that, not one Indigenous person speaks for everyone and speaks for everyone
Mhm,
across Turtle Island, and that it's so worthwhile to get to know the different communities and the different languages and the beautiful differences within the different ceremonies that still somehow connect us in a greater way. But
mhm.
to just honor the uniqueness of each individual culture in that way. And yeah, also I just your journey and what you're sharing with us of, you had to remove yourself from that at a time for
Mhm.
your healing. And now where you're at along your journey, along your life journey, your reconnection journey, it's also bringing you back to that land and back to that community. And yeah, really, really beautifully said. And I'm just so grateful, your openness of sharing that with us and listeners. Yeah.
Yeah, and you make it's an important piece to, like, talk about too. It's like a full circle, right? It's a full circle of resilience, if we wanna say, resilience is maybe a new word to us, but it has an old meaning.
Mm,
And when we think of, what I should speak for myself, when I think of resilience, I also think of adapting.
mhm,
So, adapting to the land that you're on, adapting to the culture that you follow, because there's different ways to follow culture, to follow ceremony, but we all have there's that foundation of the teachings that we all want to follow. But the resilience part is being able to be open and adaptive to where you are, what land you live on, but also remembering where you come from,
mhm,
right? And combining the two
mhm,
and whatever that looks like for us, right? So,
mhm. Beautiful. Yeah. How has reconnecting with your ancestry shaped your sense of identity?
hmm, I think I'm in the middle of that right now.
Say
I,
more.
I think I'm in the middle of reconnecting with my ancestry because I still feel some shame around it. And I don't know if it's my shame. I don't know if it's my dad's shame. Um, Maybe a little bit of guilt. Again, I don't think it's my guilt. Um, because I actually next week I'm going to be starting my family tree. And I feel like it's a big job because I'm not only going to be teaching myself, but I'm going to be teaching my dad about it as well because, he didn't get the chance to know his family, his biological family. And, I want to have a family of my own one day. And I want to be able to teach them about our ancestry. I want to teach them who their ancestors are, and, the gifts that they carried, and I want to be able to, you know, teach them where they come from,
Mhm,
so that they have that sense of belonging. And so I think I'm being in the middle of it. I'm finding that sense of belonging actually for myself,
mhm,
and I think that's going to be a journey in itself, and um, I'm prepared to do the work. I feel I'm prepared that it's, not just going to be given to me. It's not just going to be handed to me, like that I need to do the research. I need to do, the tedious stuff and finding, you know, things and the history of where my ancestors come from. So, um I think I have a little bit of anger too.
mhm,
Anger that my dad was taken away when he was 6 months old.
mhm,
Um and a little bit of anger that he didn't get that chance. I mean, he loves the family that he grew up with. I as far as I know, but it's just I think our people, like Coast Salish people or Indigenous people, we were ripped of that. We were ripped of knowing where we come from and who we come from, and that maybe there's a little bit of shame because I'm at my age, I'm just trying to figure it out.
mhm,
Maybe that's my own shame,
mhm. Yeah.
because I didn't get to grow up with grandparents. I didn't grow up with teachings. I didn't grow up with um, elders, really, and that's such an important piece, I think.
Mhm,
And it's, yeah. So I think just working throughout the shame, the guilt, the anger, but also the excitement and curiosity.
mhm.
um, Yeah.
Yeah. the shame piece resonates a lot with me. And I know, or for anyone listening who's maybe on a similar reconnection journey, I think that, the one of the best ways we can address shame is to shine a light on it and talk about it with
Mhm,
safe figures. And I know, Jasmine, like even thinking back to roads and thinking back to even where I was at that time on my
mhm,
reconnection journey, I always felt this sense of safety in our friendship. Where even today, before this podcast, I had to triple check with Jasmine of like, how can I introduce you? And am I saying this correctly?
mhm,
And thank you, Jasmine, for being that safe figure and friend in my life who I can share that with, because there's so much shame. If I was interviewing someone else, I'd probably be messaging Jasmine, being
mhm,
like, Jasmine, how do I introduce this person? I don't want to mess it up, because I think I'm in my 30s now, and there's so much I don't know. And, even just the piece around anger of like, what we feel we should know because of colonization. And if it wasn't
mhm,
ripped away from our relatives in that way, then we wouldn't be here doing all this work that we're doing.
mhm,
And yeah, I mean, one thing I think of is my younger self, or, when I started my reconnection journey, which was also my early 20s. Interesting, yeah, timeline of like what I would tell younger Sam. And I think most of the things I would have to share with her would have to do with shame, because I think shame really paralyzed her from, you know, asking questions, or sharing what she needed to share in order to like get where she is today. And it just took a long time. And I think shame was one of the things that really, really, really slowed things down. I also do think it's a slow and tender journey regardless. So if anything, maybe it was always meant to be slow, and it's going to continue to be slow. I think it's a lifelong journey. But I think the shame also, like, then we're doing it in isolation
mhm,
rather than even me and you chatting about it today, or about like being in our 20s and 30s of like what we didn't know, even about ourselves, about our own culture, about our own relatives, that I think that my immediate emotion is that sense of like embarrassment or shame, like, oh my gosh, I should know that. And I think
mhm,
that, and you've actually, been reminding me, over the years of like, Sam, like, how could you have known that? Like, look at
mhm,
colonization. Why would you have known that? It's not your fault you don't know that. And I think those are things I needed to hear, or my younger self needed to hear. So, anyways, really grateful for you, Jasmine.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. I'm grateful for you too. But yeah, that shame piece is so big.
Hmm.
I think it really speaks to a lot of our people when we don't know about ourselves.
Totally.
We don't know about our ceremonies. We don't know how to pray. We don't know how to smudge. We don't know how to dance. We don't know how to drum and sing. There's a lot of things that a lot of our people didn't get to grow up with.
Hmm.
Right? And it's about finding the right people, where you feel safe, what you were just talking about, what you feel safe without judgment. And it's finding the right people, the places, and being in the right environment, and not to
Hmm.
be afraid to ask questions,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes we come across people who we do feel judged, or we do feel like we should know something. It's, yeah, we could go on about that.
Totally. And actually, I will go on about it
Yeah.
because you're bringing to mind something for me. Just hearing you speak, I'm thinking about, again, not having an elder still not having an elder in my life.
Mhm,
Even shame comes with that. Like, I've been on this reconnection journey for over 8 years, and I'm still, I think it's something that we can't like force. You know what I mean? Like, anyways,
mhm,
what I really wanted to say was something that has helped me a lot on my reconnection journey is my connection with creator. My connection with spirituality started much younger. Yeah, that felt so innate to me growing up when I was very young, and I didn't know what it all meant, or what I was feeling or sensing or experiencing at the time. And then, I found yoga in my teens, and I often say yoga was my ceremony at the time until I reconnected with culture. And it was really my connection with creator, of maybe not having an elder or a community to go to, but who can I sit with? And then it came this greater understanding that through sitting with the trees, through walking with the forests, I'm like, oh, these are also my ancestors. Oh, these are also my
Mhm.
elders. Oh, this is really, yeah, maybe I don't have a human before me offering me these teachings right now, but the teachings are here if I just start to listen.
Mhm.
And I really think, I believe like anyone can do that and all of us can do that. Even prayer, like I believe prayer is the most powerful medicine of all. And everyone can do that regardless of your background, culture, religion, etc. Like we all have something in common as humans, or what can each one of us access that connects us to healing, connects us to spirituality in safe ways that we're not exploiting somebody else's culture, right? And I think prayer is one of those. I don't want to call it a tool, a practice. Prayer is one of those practices that we can engage with. So I wanted to, on this note and this tangent, I wanted to ask you about reconnecting with ancestry, and we talked about identity. Tell me about your connection with ancestry and spirituality, because Indigenous culture is so rich in spirituality, and just culture and spirituality, have can intersect. So I'd just love to hear
Mhm.
your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think culture and spirituality, yeah, they definitely can weave together. I think culture is a way of life for some. I'll speak for me as culture is a way of life for myself. I believe my path, I think spirituality guided me to my culture. Spirituality in AA and NA. Um, I'll be completely honest, there is a lot of God talk. The word God, and I even had to work with that. I think you might remember that. I
I
had
do.
to work with that and to be open. And so, you know, because in my culture, we want to be open, we want to be adaptive, we want to be um, kind, we want to be respectful. So, my spirituality guided me to my culture, and I think it guided me growing into a believing something that was greater than myself that could help me through hard times. Spirituality to me means that everything has a spirit. The water has a spirit, the trees have a spirit, the rocks have a spirit, the sand, the grass, I think in our way of life and being a First Nations woman or person, everything has a spirit. And that's something that I believe in. So, and again, I think that's just like the connection that we have to all of the beings, really, I think. And so I think that's the way in my path, spirituality guided me to my culture. And now I think spirituality kind of just comes so natural to me, and it weaves into my culture in my way. So culture is it brings ceremony. Culture to me brings fulfillment. It brings connection. So yeah, I that's a good question. I've never really thought about how that happens because I didn't grow up with culture.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of culture, I think of drumming, I think of ceremony, I think of um, smudging, I think of um, being by the water. I think of teachings that we follow, guidelines. Yeah, I think that's how I think of culture. But then spirituality is such an
Mm-hmm.
open concept
Mm-hmm.
where it can guide our path in multiple different ways. So yeah, I think culture or spirituality is more universal,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and culture is more specific
Mm-hmm.
in different regions, I
Mm-hmm.
guess I can say, or different communities. And it's a way of life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, when I think of culture, I think of songs, dance, language,
Mm,
drumming.
yeah.
And when I think of spirituality, I agree. I think it's more open and it's universal. And I almost wonder if, culture is one of the many bridges to spirituality, because I think, through song and through dance, we connect with something greater than ourselves. And with that connection with something greater than ourselves, Creator, the Great Spirit, that is spirituality. And that's where I
Mhm,
mean they intersect in that way. Like it's culture and it's spirituality.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think many things can be both. I think that for me, ceremony is the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, and culture can be the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. And yeah, I think so many things can be the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. And I think that culture can be that. For some people, it might be religion that is that bridge or aspects of that. And I also think that's why our world, sorry to get dark and heavy all of a sudden, but we're so disconnected, or why we were ever disconnected from culture is because it is for me it can be this bridge to spirituality or this bridge to something greater than ourselves. And for colonization to happen and take that power away from us, take culture away, take that connection to
Mhm,
something greater away, then people will be disconnected and disempowered. So,
mhm,
on a more positive, lighter note, it's so beautiful to see people reconnecting with their roots, because that's when we become empowered and we know that, we're our greatest healer. We hold that greatest medicine within ourselves. And yeah, I don't know. I think that that's what we're moving in towards now,
mhm.
in humanity. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah. How do you, when you say culture is a way of life for yourself, I'm curious how you balance modern life with traditional teachings.
That's a good one. Because I think balance is, again, a practice. It will look different every season. Um, and it does for myself, it looks different every season. So more so in like the fall and the winter, I'm a part of a winter ceremony. Can't go too much into what we do there, but we do the winter ceremony in the longhouses and the smokehouses. And that's usually can be roughly like around 6 months of the year, anywhere from 4 to 6 months. And finding the balance in the fall and the winter, I think is different every year as it comes. And I believe what I'm actually really grateful for is that I've built, I guess, my Western like career side to mesh within the winter ceremonies.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is I manifested if I'm gonna have a career, I'm gonna have a career that um will build around my culture. So it's a sense of like freedom. But when spring and summer comes around, the seasons are changing, so my balance is changing. Where for the past going on to 4 years actually, this spring and summer, um, we we move into canoe races, so like canoe culture. And so those are races that we do from all over, like the states, up the states, the island. We pretty much stay in BC, but it's a life commitment. It's a way of life again. So again, mm, my career in the spring and summer is built to fit into that. And I know I understand that not a lot of people can do that, with the career or the jobs that they have. And, they don't, I'm going to call that a luxury. They don't have that luxury. So I just remember in the beginning of my sobriety praying that I prayed for freedom, I prayed for security, and I prayed for stability. And that's what kind of brought me to the career that I have, where I can make my own hours and still live. within my culture and spirituality, and so I've learned to find balance with that, but um, there are times where it is a bit of a struggle where I'm constantly searching for the balance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you acknowledged and shared that it's a luxury that you are able to do that, but I also just want to acknowledge like the commitment and sacrifices that you have to make in order to make that possible for yourself. Even
Mhm.
though it might be a luxury or a privilege, it's also, you're really committed and really dedicated, and I can imagine there's certain sacrifices and choices that you make in order to, yeah, build your life that way and to build, culture comes first.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think, and I guess it just happened that way where, yeah, you're right. And thank you for bringing that up. I did do a lot of work to, for that freedom, for that stability, for that security. And I guess, my sign's a Capricorn, so I'm on the go, 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 and I like to get things done. And, I like work. That was one of my thing was, I want to love what I do so that it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like I'm working. So,
Mhm.
but culture always comes first, spirituality always comes first. And if I can sprinkle that in every single day, then that's great. Then that's a balance for me.
Beautiful. Yeah. I pardon me. I know you said to ask you about like quotes or words to live by at the end, and I can still bring that up again at the end. But I also wanted to ask you more specific to like potentially spirituality or reconnecting with ancestry. Are there any books or resources that have been really influential in your path?
Yes. What comes up is The Untethered Soul that we got to read in, I believe it was our spiritual uh, course that we took in our program together. Um, The Untethered Soul, I can't remember exactly, because it was a few years ago, but I just remember that feeling so inspired by that book, and I remember feeling spiritually uplifted with
Mhm.
that book, and it really changed my perspective on life. Like, I think I finished it probably within 2 to 3 days. It's not a very big book, but it's a really good book. And another books, I guess I can say, because there's a series of books from her, but, Gabby Bernstein,
Mhm.
I follow her, and she has really good books on spirituality, wellness, self-care, yeah.
And yes, I love the Untethered Soul.
Mhm.
I think I can't remember, the first time I read it was before Roads, and then but it is a small book, and it's easy, especially if you are feeling inspired by it. For any listeners, like if you haven't already picked it up, yeah, The Untethered Soul, it's a good book for sure. I feel
Yeah,
like that's yeah, go ahead, sorry.
well, and like you just said it right there, it was easy to read.
Yeah.
Like, it spoke the language that I like to speak, like, I'm very relaxed and,
Mm,
yeah, I like the language of that book.
yeah. Any books or resources from any Indigenous authors that you want to share with listeners?
Yes, and correct me, you might know some of these books. Oh, what was it? Have you heard of the book I think Walk with My Moccasins?
Oh, yes, I think I
I'm
know In
saying
My
it wrong.
Moccasins, Helen Knott.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was a really good one.
Yeah.
Um, oh, I've read a couple good ones. Yeah, I can't remember the name of them right now.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm curious what it's been like for you on your journey having mixed ancestry. You mentioned your mom was English, Scottish, white passing. Yeah, how do you hold that, and what's that been like for you?
Yeah, it's all a learning process. So in school, we talk a lot about ancestry. We talk, well, in my work too, everywhere actually we talk about ancestry. We talk about, where we come from, about our culture. And it's crazy because when I was young, I was so invested or so leaning heavy on the English and the Scottish side and the white passing side. And now I'm like leaning more heavy on my First Nations side, where I'm really trying not to forget that part of me
Mm,
that I once leaned heavy on. And it's now I'm trying to really find the balance of it because again, even on my mom's side, I didn't get to meet my grandparents. I didn't get to actually meet any of her family, really. Um, and my mom's been through a hard life too, and so, when I talk to her about it and I try to learn, there's a little bit of a blockage, and I think the blockage is from her, but from me too. Um, so now it's almost like again that full circle where now I'm leaning heavy on the First Nation side of me, where now I'm trying to learn more about my mom's side as well,
mhm,
um, and to be proud of that. And so I'm still trying to find the balance with that. And I think the mixed part, maybe there's still a little bit of shame around it. And here comes shame again because, um I didn't get my status card until I was 18. And that was because they couldn't I couldn't, or I guess my family couldn't confirm, I lack of better words, my blood quantum. Because one, my mom is not First Nations, and my dad was a part of the 60s scoop, and they believed that his mom is First Nations, which she is, but his dad was not. So, yeah, so there was like a mixture of that kind of going on where I was a little bit angry that, I wasn't able to get my status until I was 18. I was fine though, but um yeah, again, I think there's a little shame around, not knowing,
mhm,
about that side of me, but also I have like a little sense of like I'm proud to be mixed, but I really gotta find the wording and the language on how can I balance that.
mhm,
Also like the knowledge around it too, right? So
mhm.
because my mom doesn't really talk much about her family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for so like bravely or courageously like naming and shining a light on shame as it shows up. I know it really resonates with me a lot, and hearing you
Mhm.
say it makes me feel less alone.
Mm.
Yeah, and when you mentioned blood quantum and status card, I'm curious if you wanted to say anything about blood quantum, or if you wanted to talk about that at all, or if there's, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Um, I think blood quantum is BS, if I could say that.
Yes. Oh, you can swear on this. Yes.
Okay, I think when somebody has to say, you know, how native they are or how white they are, because you know what? I did that when I was growing up.
Mhm,
I would say, you know, I'm, and this isn't true, I would just spit out numbers. When I was younger in like elementary school and even a part of high school, I would say, "Oh, I'm native, but I'm more white."
mhm,
Because again, remember I would lean more heavy on my white side.
mhm,
And that's kind of lack of a better word speaking about blood quantum.
mhm,
Um, and I think the status card piece, I didn't have any issue without having one. And thankfully, I was able to get one when I was 18 because, now it does help me in certain areas of my life. But then I also think it's also labeling us as a number. We are a number to the government because of our status cards. And, then it leads to thinking, because of the Indian Act and, we are the only um, race that has government laws to control us in the entire world. Like, if we really think about that, nowhere else has this, and with no other race, from my understanding. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. But, again, it makes me angry to think that, but it also makes me feel um, we had to have that set in place because of how powerful we are
Mm,
and how strong we were, our ancestors. So, again, yes, I have a status card. Yes, I'm a number to the government. Um, and yes, I have one because of my blood quantum, basically. I think it doesn't make me any better than
mhm,
anybody that doesn't have one, you know.
totally.
And I could live without one. I believe I could live without one, but I think, yeah, I don't really talk much about blood quantum, but when it does come up, like it came up for me through 18 years of my life.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that today, because I know when I think of my younger self, I didn't know what that meant. Or similar to you, I would tell people I'm part native. I'm
Hmm.
I'm part, until I got to this place on my reconnection journey where I was like, I don't want to describe myself in halves, quarters, or parts. I'm actually, not like I think a lot of people with mixed ancestry, not to speak for everyone, I'll speak for myself, like we deserve to feel whole too. And
Hmm.
it's like reinforcing a lack of wholeness if we're consistently describing ourselves in halves, quarters, or parts.
Hmm.
And it's okay to say, I'm Nakota and I'm Scottish and I'm Icelandic. I'm part this, I'm part that. We actually can eliminate that word and it still makes complete sense. And
Hmm.
yeah, thanks for speaking to status cards as well. I didn't have mine until I was 25 or 26. And I think that, oh, I just want to share this book, this resource with listeners. Maybe you know of it, Jasmine. It's called Indigenous Rights, WRITES by Chelsea Vowell. It's a phenomenal resource. It's one of the best books I've ever read. Yeah, anyone who's on a reconnection journey, please pick up that book. It explains so much information that then I had knowledge and I felt a lot less shame around certain things. And she has an entire chapter about like blood quantum or status cards. And there are many Indigenous people that will never have a status card, and it doesn't make them any less Indigenous. And I think knowing that and understanding that is so important because, yeah, you said it, and I'm so glad you named that part of like, I'm not any better than, I'm not any more than, something. Speaking for myself, reconnecting with Indigenous ancestry, you know, I'm not Indigenous enough. I'm not blank enough,
Hmm.
right? Again, just another belief, etched into us by colonization.
Hmm.
And I think that, yeah, you don't need a status card. You don't need like permission from anybody else to, define that aspect of you that you know to be true, right?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions and then we'll move into your work and what you're doing now. But I have two more important questions for you.
Okay.
Um, for someone who doesn't have any connection with culture and they are First Nation, what guidance would you offer them if they're trying to reconnect?
I would I think we talked a little bit about it before about spirituality and culture, right? Spirituality is something so universal and it could be so intimate.
Mhm.
What does spirituality mean to you? What does believing in prayer mean to you? What does it mean to connect to spirituality? So for somebody, you mentioned if they are First Nations.
Yes, if they are First Nation. Mhm.
I I think of resilience, right? So they're trying to really rediscover, reconnect because they have it within themselves, but they have like just a bunch of if we think of an onion, right? They just have a bunch of layers throughout their life experiences that are kind of covering of the gifts that they carry within themselves. And I believe that they have everything that they need within themselves. They just have to peel back those layers, right? And so what does it look like to peel back those layers? Right? We do it as an individual, but it's really important that we find our sense of belonging with
Mhm.
the environment that we are surrounded in, right? So if they want change and they can't do it in the environment that they're in, then if it's possible, change your environment, change the people that you're surrounding yourself with, right? Find the people who connect to spirit. Find the people who have spirituality in their life, whatever that looks like. A big piece when I can think of that is connection. What does it look like to connect with yourself? What does it look like to connect with the community around you? What does it look like to connect with your family? What does it look like to connect with prayer, with spirituality? Like, what does that look like for you? I think it's just like very like curiosity, right? Being really curious to what's around you. Um, because sometimes in the beginning, it could be a lonely path. You could feel a little bit lonely because we do have to find the right people. But if that people don't come along right away, then maybe I would honestly, like what we were saying before, connect to the land around you. Go sit by the water and pray. Go walk in the forest and pray. And if you don't know how to pray, and if it feels like you're talking to yourself and nobody's listening, I can almost 100% guarantee somebody's listening. You know, I wanted to say 99, but I'm a firm believer.
I'm a firm believer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the guidance that you would offer to someone who's not First Nations any different? So, for someone who's seeking connection, who doesn't have any connection with culture, sorry, but they're not First Nation, what guidance would you offer them?
Honestly, I again, I think it's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I speak on spirituality, right? I know you said with culture, um,
Mhm.
but I for me, and the reason why I speak on that is because for me, my path was spirituality led me to my culture, and for some people might go to ceremony or do something around their culture, and then it might lead them to spirituality, right?
Mhm.
Into believing something,
Mhm.
believing in the spirit of that culture, believing into the spirit of that ceremony. So, but what I just explained before, I believe whether you're First Nations or not, it still stands the same.
Yeah. What about someone who's First Nation who's trying to reconnect with culture?
I would say, yeah, that would have to do with the surroundings that they have or that they're surrounded by. So let's say if um, you know, let's say they wanted to start on their own, right? I talk about again prayer. You know, prayer, pray, start praying for that, start manifesting, start putting that into the universe that you want to find your culture again, that you want to rediscover your culture. And if you start praying and believing that you're going to find that within your path, people are going to be put in your path to direct you into that path that you want to go on to find your culture. Um, I do believe that yeah, people will be put in your place if you believe that you're gonna find, you know, people that can bring you to the to ceremony. But there's also, you know, I don't want to say universal, like I guess it just depends where they're located, really.
Mhm.
Just simply research what's around you in your community. What kind of whether it's like a drum making workshop, that's culture. Whether it's a drum circle, whether it's like at the friendship center at the powwow nights that they have, that's culture. Um, really expanding their comfort zone
Mhm.
and bringing themselves into those environments, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing your guidance with us. Now let's chat about Indigenous healing. Why don't you start by sharing with us? And I'm so curious because I know you've gone back to school since our time in school together. Tell us more about what you're doing now in school or in work.
So in school, I'm almost done my second year, and I could do 4 years if I want, and I most likely am gonna get my bachelor's, but I'm in a program called Indigenous Holistic Wellness and Addictions. Long name, but it's all Indigenous focused, and about Indigenous healing and what that looks like for our communities and for as an individual, as a collective, as family. Um, and it's teaching myself how to weave the Western approach in healing, but also the Indigenous way of healing. Because as much as I would love our people to um, be invested in our culture, be invested in our ways of life to help them heal, sometimes I just don't have that at the moment. And sometimes we need the Western way of healing to help us kind of integrate that, right? And the Western way of healing, I'm talking like counseling, I'm talking like um, sometimes we need to go on medication to help ourselves get through tough times. And, sometimes we need to do those types of healing to, and then get invested in or integrated into ceremony. So the schooling that I'm in really teaches us about historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, addiction, how our people were affected by it, and what it would look like to help our people find their sense of belonging, their identity. Um, and, a lot of it has to do with the medicine wheel or the wellness wheel. So, like looking at what mental wellness is, what emotional wellness, and physical and spiritual wellness is for us. And just to provide that space and resources for the people who want to start their recovery path and connect them to an elder, connect them to ceremony, connect them to the land, and really get them to peel back those layers that I was talking about in order to really reconnect with themselves. So, school wise, yeah, I'm almost on my second year, and I've really like I just did a presentation on intergenerational trauma.
Mhm.
And those are really heavy topics.
Mm.
And, but I'm in a safe environment where I'm just being completely open without a judgment or without like a no judgment free zone. Like we can ask all the questions, about what happened to our people. And we are in an environment where we can learn the history of it so that we could share with our people and what happened. Because if we're stuck in addiction, if we're stuck in poverty, if we've been or know somebody who's experienced a lot of grief in their life, we are all affected by the historical trauma that our people went through. So, and not a lot of us know that. Not a lot of us have the understanding of that. So, to be able to learn about that and teach our people of what happened to our people, it almost opens it up thinking, oh, it's not all me.
Mm.
It's not completely my fault the way I am. And it kind of brings a sense of like the shame piece. It lifts that a little bit and brings some compassion. It brings some, self-love. And yeah, so I'm really liking my school. I'm really liking the Indigenous lens of everything. And I can't wait to I don't know where it's taking me. That's the school. I don't know where it's taking me. I don't know what I'm going to be doing at the end of it, but I do know that I'm still going to be helping our people heal, whatever that looks like.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's very an open model in terms of open to all models of care and
Oh yeah.
how they integrate and how they actually support one another rather than one being better than the other. It's how do they work together or what's needed here in order to, for example, maybe being on medication and then, where do we go from there and what does that allow us to access or reconnect with? And yeah, just I've loved the openness of this model.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you could tell us more about um, what would be examples of Indigenous healing and how it helps people?
I think examples of Indigenous healing would be the circle of life. The circle of life and really believing that the path that we have chosen is the path that if we're willing to, so I'm going to rewind that a little bit. If we're willing to face the storms on our healing journey, then that's going to bring us strength. That's going to bring us wisdom. That's going to give us um, power to ourselves and like what's around us. So indigenous healing is really believing in yourself, but also believing that you are worthy, that you have a place on this earth. Um, and I think indigenous healing also means that, we're trying to heal multiple parts of ourselves, but also parts of our ancestors as well. So I think when I think of Western healing, a lot of it has to do with our mind, our mental health, which is not wrong. It's we have to remember, things to help our mind heal, but we also have to, and with when I think of indigenous healing, we have to find that connection between the mind and the heart, the mind, the heart, and the spirit. And so I think indigenous healing is holistic in a way where it it targets all aspects of our life. So mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. And that's a more mm, a fitting practice for our people, I think, because not only we will have I'm trying to think of a word. Um, we might have anxiety, we might have depression, we might have PTSD, but we also have to remember our emotional part aspect, like our emotional being, the emotions that we carry, because I believe that our body holds emotion, right? With all the experiences that we've been through. And then we have to take care of our physical health, right? We have to remember to take care of our physical health. But then what's not really integrated in Western society is spiritual health,
Mhm.
spiritual wellness. And so when I think of Indigenous healing, it has all four of those aspects um, that we can explore when we choose to.
Why do you think spiritual health isn't part of our society?
Our spiritual health, I think, like when I think of like our teachings, our history, our gifts that we have, I think that spiritual health, spiritual wellness, whatever we want to call it, is not a part of Western society because there's no scientific proof that it works. That there's no, yeah, there's no scientific proof that, spirit or culture is healing for us. And maybe there's a reason for that. I'm not pushing for there to be scientific proof,
Mhm.
because a part of me feels that the reason why we can't physically prove that that helps us is because maybe it's so sacred to our people that we just need it for ourselves. We just need to believe in it because if there was proof, everybody would try it, which
Mhm.
I would want everybody to try, taking care of themselves spiritually, but there's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that, not needing proof, that's part of the process because trust is such a big part of the process. Even earlier when you talk about like a huge aspect of Indigenous healing is believing in yourself.
Mhm.
There's not always this like it's this felt sense within the body and the heart, right? That we can't always prove, or even, I mean, just the idea of proof. I understand in certain contexts, sometimes we need evidence for things, but even just this idea of proof or proving or justifying feels like it's coming from this place of not enough. Therefore, I
Mhm.
have to prove, I have to justify, right? And I think that, yeah, I guess one of the words coming to mind for me when you speak or share is just like decolonization of not needing that proof of allowing, belief and trust to be part of medicine, part of healing. And and allow that to be enough.
Mhm.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I often think, why isn't spiritual well-being and spiritual health integrated into our world in a more meaningful way? And I often think because if it was, we would all be so powerful beyond measure because we'd be reminded of our innate wholeness and reminded that we are our greatest healers, and which would bring us into empowerment. And I mean, capitalism makes so much money off of us being disconnected and disempowered, right? Most, and so
Yeah.
why would they want to empower us
Yeah.
to be our own greatest healers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, are there any traditional teachings or ceremonies or community connections, like any even personal stories around those things that you can share that you'd like to share that have played a key role in your own healing?
Yeah, I think the teachings that, you know, well, I think I said it before where, everything has a spirit.
Mhm.
We and a lot of the things we do with prayer. And I believe that and also like seasons, when seasons change, are the seasons change naturally, and then so do we as natural human beings. So, I think when I think of teachings, I'm trying to think, for me it's like a way of life, when I think of teachings. And I'm trying to think of, and that's a big question. It's a really good question. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's you. I don't know is also an answer. And I think that, I mean, for you now, culture is a way of life. And so maybe these, the teachings, the ceremonies, community, it's like you live it and breathe it every day. It's all a part of your healing journey every day.
Yeah, yeah, I think you couldn't have said it perfectly. Like that's what it is. And I feel that, you know, when I really want to pray and connect to my ancestors, I mean, I could pray anywhere. I could pray in my car, which I normally do because I'm by myself. Um, but I also go to the water.
Mhm.
A teaching that I was told that as our ancestors travel along the water.
Mhm.
And so if I really want to feel connected, if I want to feel um, calm, if I want to just really embrace the prayer, I'll go by the water. I
Mm.
guess that's something that I really do follow and go into Mother Nature. Like we spoke kind of in the beginning of being connected to Mother Nature and using prayer. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm leaning heavy on the prayer.
Yeah, yeah. Totally. I shared this earlier, and I'm so glad prayer has been such a big part of today's conversation because, I think what I really want to help people do is reconnect with spirituality. And it's really important for me to do that, to help people do that in ways that aren't appropriative or exploitive of Indigenous cultures. And I think prayer is the one thing that we can all do. And I think prayer is just so empowering. You know, People often want to use or work with medicines outside of themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's your truth, your culture, and you're meant to be doing that. But sometimes people are doing that from a place of feeling like they need something outside of themselves when the medicine is right here. It's in your
Mhm.
words, it's in your intention, it's in that every single day, every single moment. And yeah, yeah, so I'm really glad prayer has been such a big part of today's conversation. I actually have a podcast coming out about prayer. I don't know when it's going to be in relation to this one, but I mean, we need lots of talking about prayer because I think humanity needs it right now, you know? So, yeah. Final few questions for you, Jasmine.
Mhm.
As the name of the podcast is Life as Ceremony. Um, what do well, what does life as ceremony mean to you?
I think life as ceremony is, I believe that it's like living your life, you know, around ceremony. And what I mean by that is like, I think when I mentioned just always believing that you're in prayer, when I'm driving to work and um because I have to work to live in this society, you know, sometimes my drive is my prayer. Sometimes, and I think when you say life is ceremony, I think we can have ceremony anywhere that we choose to have it. And I really believe that I need ceremony to live,
Mhm,
and whatever that looks like, whether it's sitting by the water, whether it's listening to somebody drum and sing, connecting to the prayer of that song is ceremony. So when you say, I think life as ceremony is such a powerful statement, and I really believe that the way we choose to live can be a ceremony in itself.
mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Even especially for me, when you talk about your drive or that being a place you pray, and yeah, it just resonates with me because I'm doing a lot of driving these days, and it's definitely definitely a place to pray, but also, you know, um, I always say like life is a ceremony and being present with it is a prayer, and just the presence. I imagine you driving, praying, like that presence, that connection, that spirituality, that ceremony, that's, yeah, connection with self and with the world around you. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. How can listeners find you and support you?
I believe they can just find me on Instagram. Yeah, my Instagram, Jazz Feschuk. I post. It's not like I wouldn't say it's my business account, but I post my business stuff on there. I post my personal stuff on there. Um, I think I just do that because they kind of go hand in hand.
Mhm.
They I think my business and my personal, like they weave together, and so I really find that there's a connection when, people know those both sides of me. So, yeah, just on my Instagram.
Okay, amazing. And yeah, if anyone is looking for Jasmine and wants to connect with her, you can also reach out to me if you're, yeah, looking to find her, and I can definitely connect the two of you as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today, Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's so good to see you.